here, and you're on. There we go.
Well, welcome. I'm glad that you can make it to the webinar that will go over about what's going on with this midterm election. And then we're going to have a second part that's for those in California to go down the ballot and take a look at the judges, propositions, candidates, and what have you. But the first part, we're going to be talking about why this midterm is so extremely important. When we talk about this, I found myself seeing audiences absolutely stunned about what the opposition looks like. And so we're going to cover what the opposition is doing, what's happening with some of these districts, and what's being done really to counteract what's going on. So we've got a lot to cover, and we've got about a minute to go. Oftentimes when I speak, my wife Shelly's with me, and she's not going to be with me for this webinar. But this webinar will be available for people to send out on Facebook, by email, to be able to get this out and distribute it. And we're going to break this webinar down into two parts. And the first part of this webinar is about why this midterm is so absolutely essential. And the second part is about the election. And so with the first part, a lot of the content is found in my new book, The Deep State, 15 Surprising Dangers You Should Know. And with the Deep State book, what I basically talked about is how to be able to understand what deep state is, how to overcome it. And a lot of that is right here in this election. And so we'll be referring to that. And when we talk about this election, we talk about really this craziness that's going on throughout the nation. So many people are stunned at seeing the political drama played out. And so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at what I've been giving to groups and organizations and churches throughout the United States, but specifically in California. So this is the national version. And I've been telling people something that I've never said in my life. I've been doing this over 25 years, talking and educating about the election. And here's the thing. This is the most important midterm election of your lifetime. I truly believe it is, because what's at stake in this election is so incredible. We're talking about impeachment of Donald Trump, impeachment of Supreme Court Judge Kavanaugh, Supreme Court Judge Gorsuch. This could be nonstop impeachment for 2 years. We're talking about incredible transformation of what's happened. Positive, historic transformation has taken place among many judges being appointed that are strict constructionists, not judicial activists. All that will be halted. In my book, The Deep State, in this book, I talk about the FBI and the CIA and the NSA and the FISA abuse and the corruption of power. I talk about what's gone on with the Department of Justice and the insanity that's gone on there. All this is going to be covered up. The Johnson Amendment. You know, President Trump, one of his promises to evangelical Christians, there was a meeting with Franklin Graham and Greg Laurie and Christian megachurch pastors and radio commentators and authors. I was there with my wife, and at that meeting, the first thing that President Trump, before he was president, said is he's going to do away with the Johnson Amendment. That's the bill that in 1954 that gagged pastors, said they couldn't talk about political and cultural issues or they'd lose their tax exemption. He said he's the first person who ever said he'd get rid of it. Well, he's been trying. That will be halted if the progressive Democrats take over in this midterm election. The tax cuts have been historic. I've seen such a boom in business throughout the United States with jobs being created, businesses booming, people seeing their incomes rising. And part of that has been the historic deregulation that's gone on. But both of those, tax cut number 2 and the deregulation, is going to stop. Religious protections have been historic in what's been done to protect the faith community. And the whole issue of justice. All of these are just some of the key things that make this the most important midterm election of our lifetime. Now, when we talk about this, I want to talk about why your vote is important. And I want to talk about how to vote your values. I want to talk about candidate research and then turning this around and kind of an action plan for doing that. You see, we have a world that's in crisis. Right now, the Middle East is in such turmoil, and it's a very dangerous situation. And Israel's feeling it, under attack constantly. Iran is growing in its threat to the U.S., to Israel, to peace in the world. Russia's becoming more aggressive. And, China. President Trump at least recognizes how China is the greatest threat to the U.S. Its dominance in military, economic issues is with the idea of controlling the world, much like communism did with Russia back in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s and 80s. It's now China. And of course, we have the whole issue with Korea. So we have this whole thing internationally. And for those in the faith community, what we're seeing overseas is a historic genocide against people of faith, especially Christians. Historic amount of people being killed and slaughtered and imprisoned and churches torn down in China. And, that's why Mike Pompeo, Sam Brownback, and Mike Pence, the vice president, held a historic ministerial on religious freedom. And my wife and I were invited to this, and we were maybe like 30 people from the U.S. here, 30 Americans. The rest of the 350 attendees were from 84 countries. And then this 3-day conference for government leaders and different key people in these countries, one person after another talked about the horrific effects of religious persecution on minorities. Myanmar, China, Korea, Sudan, Nigeria, growing threats in Russia, all these different countries. In the slide that you see, the man above me, it was a Sudan pastor who was one of the speakers. People were in tears. All over the world, people were crying as they heard him speak. I came up to give him a hug. You can see he's got the coat on. That coat was like filled with cotton. He was just like a skeleton for 2 years being in prison, tortured. My wife and I, in the bottom picture, were around the person who's in charge of the Christians in Mosul area of Iraq, where over 80% of his people were beheaded, crucified, killed. And he was there. We're seeing so much persecution. In India, Compassion International, World Vision have been kicked out. Pastors, missionaries have been beaten, have been threatened. Churches burnt down, Christian business owners, buildings and homes burnt. The Hindu persecution is growing. And Cuba, I just got back from Cuba not long ago, where I spoke to several hundred pastors in the underground church, where we went church to church also, and the persecution there, and the issues there. All these are things that, for the first time, the U.S. government has decided to take a stand to protect religious minorities. Now, on the last day, Mike Pence gets up and he goes to Turkey. For 2 years, you've held this, Pastor. We're going to impose economic sanctions and even withdraw military aid if you do not release Pastor Andrew Brunson. Well, the economy collapsed, the currency collapsed, and finally, Andrew Brunson is free. And he was able to come to the U.S., back to the U.S., gets on his knees and prays for the president and prays for you. And that's this commitment that the U.S. government, for the first time, has taken. But heads are spinning. The progressive left want to stop this type of thing from us being a voice for the persecuted church. That's on the election ballot. That's an issue, too, that needs to be resolved. We have the whole issue of the economic dangers that affect Americans and jobs and businesses. Because economically, we have, from the deregulation and the tax cutting, a booming economy, but the danger is there of this historic debt, so much unsustainable spending going on, that we have to cut the size of government, and we got to cut this. And then we have the issues of the Fed and the potential of inflation rearing its ugly head. So we've got the economic issues on the ballot too, that we can't let the progressive left take over. And what about religious freedom here in the U.S.? It's under attack too. You can be an atheist, you can be an agnostic, you can be Jewish, you can be Buddhist, you can be anything. The fact is, people around the world came to the U.S. for religious liberty. It's our First Amendment rights. It's the foundation of our country. And we're a better country when we protect religious minorities. And we're finding that's not being protected today. And President Trump and members of Congress are trying to change that, but we've got a long ways to go. The new Supreme Court is going to be a huge help, but we got to make sure they're not going to be impeached. We got to make sure that they're protected. You know, business owners, schools, employees, all these have been under attack. The fire chief in Atlanta, he's fired because he believes marriage between a man and a woman. This man was well decorated and well acknowledged as one of the best fire chiefs in the U.S., and yet he's persecuted just because of his beliefs. He just got a $1.5 million award. Jack Phillips at Masterpiece Cake Shop, he would sell cakes and cookies to anyone. That was, in his eyes, a ministry. He loved doing that to people. But he couldn't bake a cake where he uses his creative talent to promote a same-sex marriage. He goes and finds himself being fined and a judge saying he has to go to counseling for re-education. Well, the Supreme Court said, hey, that's religious persecution. They sent him back, but it hasn't resolved the issue. The lady on your screen, Barnell, she is going to lose her business. She's going to lose her 401k and her home because of the same issue of selling flowers to a lesbian couple. You know what? She's 78 years old. And a photographer in New Mexico had the same issue. And this is what the judge said. This is the price of citizenship. Christians must compromise, if only a little, to accommodate the contrasting values of others. No, in America, you don't compromise your conscience. And that is wrong. So we have a huge attack here in the United States. And part of my book, I go into a variety of things, including the war on Christianity. I go into the media. I go into the judges. I go into a variety of different things that are contributing to this. And what does it contribute to? More nanny state collectivism and statism. That's what the progressive left wants. More job-killing regulations and taxes. That's what the socialists want. More failing schools, more neglect of water, roads, and infrastructure, more social engineering, and more attacks on people of faith. This is what this election is about. Now, as we take a look at this election, there's a couple of things that we need to be aware of. First of all, there's two ways of voting. Two ways of voting. One is the lesser of two evils is evil. You want to vote only for the perfect candidate. Well, in a general election, you usually can't find that. In fact, what I tell people normally, that the perfect candidate is usually themselves. Everybody else falls short. So the other way of doing it is what we call strategically limiting evil. Strategically limiting evil. And what that is you know, you want to be try to lessen evil. You may not be doing the best candidate, but you're doing the second best candidate, and that's strategically limiting the evil. Let me give you an example. Let's say you happen to be pro-life. You're for promoting life. You're against abortion, and you got two candidates running. One is for abortion under all conditions. The second one, they're against partial birth abortion, but they're for taxpayers' funding of abortion. They're for abortion in general, but they're against partial birth abortion, late-term abortion. If you have the lesser of two evils, you're not going to vote for either. But to strategically limit evil, you may say to yourself, I can protect some babies' lives by voting for candidate B that is against partial birth abortion. I'm saving some babies' lives. That's strategically limiting evil. And that's what we're going to really be faced with in this election. Now, one of the things you can't fall for, you cannot fall for the mail and the email and the Facebook, where it's basically these slate mailings, what's called a slate mailing. You know, I've got some slate mailings here that that are just incredible. Your mailbox is probably full of them. Your email box is full of them. Facebook is full of them. This one shows a picture of Ronald Reagan and says, continuing the Republican Revolution. But almost all the candidates are contrary to what any Reagan Republican would want. You see, at the bottom, near with an asterisk by each candidate or proposition, it says, if you get a magnifying glass, the candidate paid to be included in that mailing. This one here is called Cops Voter Guide. Yet with the Cops Voter Guide, everybody in here is basically anti-justice, anti-law for the criminal. It's contrary if you want to have a law and order candidate. This one in California, they have Proposition 13 done many years ago by Howard Jarvis, and there's a group called the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. It's to protect taxpayers. Well, out comes a mailing with a picture of Howard Jarvis, and it's, say, Proposition 13 newsletter. You open it up, and Joe Capel of the Harvard Jarvis Taxpayers Association writes the article. But the candidates endorsed in the slate mailing are contrary to what the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association has recommended. It's complete falsehood and, to me, quite criminal. Across the United States, people get mailers like this. This one happens to be for the city of Los Angeles. It says City of Los Angeles sample ballot for Republican voters. And you open it up, and what do you see? A letter from the president of the Republican Party asking for contributions. Second page, a contribution form that they could send to Sacramento. And then in yellow and with red check marks are the recommendations of the candidates, who are all Democrats. Now, this was the marked sample ballot for Republican voters. Looks like an official Republican mailer. And it's recommending all Democrats. So Republicans go along and say, oh, this is who I should vote for. Fraud. I have a video on these slate mailings. And everybody who registered for this webinar, I'm going to send you a copy of that video. If you're getting this webinar off YouTube or a website, let me know by email at craig@electionforum.org. And what I'll do, or craig@craighuey.com, craig@craighuey.com, I will let you know about this and a number of other things that you can use to tell others about not falling for this trap of these slate mailers. What you need are legitimate mailers, and that's key. So if you're outside of California, if you're in the state of Washington, go to WeBelieveVote.com. If you're in Florida, go to FloridaFamilyAction.org. And if you're in Maine, to CCLMaine.org. And then everyone else throughout the United States, go to ivoterguide.com, ivoterguide.com. I will send these URLs to you. And if you're in California, you want to go to craighuey.com, craighuey.com, because on that, from the governor's race and Senate race down to city council, from Northern California to San Diego, we have covered all the candidates. We include the judges and we include the propositions. I wish we could do this nationwide. We just don't have the funding to be able to do that, but we do have it for California. And otherwise, go to these other excellent websites that are giving guidance for this important midterm election. So with this, I have a newsletter and social media. We cover about 500,000 people. And with that, half of them are outside of California. The other half are in California. And that's why we have such a concentration on California. So my newsletter, the Huey Report, which talks about economics, it talks about politics. Then we have Reality Alert. That's a newsletter for evangelical Christians. Both of these newsletters give you information you won't find anywhere else. It covers all the different information you're going to need about what's happening. What I've covered is just kind of the highlight. And you can follow us on Facebook. I can always use friends. And of course, if you're on Twitter, you've got to get my tweets. Now, what about turning this around? Now, there's different things we can do to turn this around. I believe the answer are those who are watching this webinar. I think that you can be instrumental in making the change for this election and beyond. And see, this election, we have a mighty war going on against people who believe in freedom, who believe in individual liberty. And these are the collectivists, the socialists, who want to enlarge government, take away our freedoms. And they've developed, when Trump won and Hillary lost, those in the deep state and the Obama administration prepared documents. The main document they prepared that has been used as a guide throughout the United States is a publication called Indivisible. It gives them messaging, strategy, tactics that you're seeing played out today in being able to turn the election into a progressive win. So Indivisible is key. I'm going to send it to everyone. And again, if you're not officially registered for this webinar, send me an email at craighuey.com. I'll send you this Indivisible, the Bible of the progressive left on how to transform society and politics. And then I'll send you some of the other things like that Slate Miller video. We have a big problem here in California, but it's also a problem nationwide. We've had over $74 million put into transforming this election by Tom Steyer, who wants to run for president of the United States. But he's smart. He's strategic. He is paying people to door knock, to register people to vote. He's using direct mail smart. He's using phone calls smart. He's using text and the most advanced strategy, because he knows the one thing he can do. He can build a database. He's built over 6 million people nationwide for his presidential run. He's learned how to engage them and build relationship with them. And this is kind of under the radar that most people don't know about. They may have heard of him, but they don't know how he's been able to collect so many supporters. You know, you may have seen these TV commercials on impeaching President Trump. Well, notice that there's a URL for people to sign in, a petition, and be able for him to collect all that data. So it's a smart campaign. And in California, we have the issue, and this is also borne out almost every state in the nation, that the business groups have been just dumping money into the Democrats and into the progressive left. This is 1 week's worth of money coming in from the real estate and the hospital association, dental association, and we can duplicate that in most other states in the nation. But here's the key thing. There's a formula to win an election, and we can win this election, and we can win 2020 if we follow this. This is what the progressive left is starting to do, and that will be successful on their part if they're able to do it. And it's kind of the guerrilla marketing that President Trump did. You know, President Trump, he only had $957 million for his presidential election. Hillary had $1.4 billion. By all accounts, she should have won. But you see, money ineffectively used is not going to win an election. So you need to have some money, but you can have less than your opponent. But you need to do that data collection of who is your supporters, or who are the persuadables. And then you got to have proper and dynamic digital and targeted marketing. That's what Indivisible talks about. That's what the strategy is. And quite frankly, on the digital and targeted marketing, those who are conservative and libertarian are often doing it better than the progressive left. But we have to be able to have that done, and then we tie it to getting out the vote, knocking on doors, making those calls, making sure people mail in their ballot or go to the poll. And whoever is able to get out that vote tied to the data is going to be the winner. That's the victory. So messaging can help or it can hurt, but to win an election, you need that winning formula. You don't have to compromise your values. You don't have to compromise your message. You have to do a campaign properly. And we can do that. You know, this 2016 campaign proved that a candidate doesn't have to match dollars or outspend their efforts, doesn't have to rely on TV commercials, doesn't have to compromise or water down positions. And it proved that evangelicals will vote. It proved that to win an election, you have to have this integrated marketing. You have to have the digital ad with a ground game, with targeted and data driven. And principle and conviction wins over political positioning. And again, reach out to the evangelicals. Why am I talking about the evangelicals in this election? Because I think they really do hold the key to helping us win the election. For example, there's 80 million evangelical voters, but only 35 to 46% actually are registered to vote. Yet when you get down to it, you register an evangelical, you get them to the poll, they'll vote 81% conservative libertarian. You get and then there's 45 to 55% of the evangelicals who are registered, but they don't vote. 52% of the evangelicals did not vote in 2016. 48% did. So what I've been doing, I've been going around speaking to churches, about 40 different churches, but also to pastors. I spoke to over 150 pastors who never before had been involved in politics, but now they're engaged. Now they want to see their churches do something to vote. You know, President Trump discovered in 2016 the evangelicals held the key to his election. You know, when you think about it, what happened was in 2016, Hillary thought she was going to win. The Democrats thought she was going to win. The pollsters thought she was going to win. The talking heads thought she was going to win. The Republicans thought she was going to win. And Donald Trump thought she was going to win. But what they didn't count on were these evangelicals that were organized and motivated in Florida, in North Carolina, and Wisconsin, these other states that they thought were going to go for Hillary. But the evangelicals got registered. The pastors got their fellowships to sign up. They got them out to vote, people who had never voted before, and it was transformational for Trump winning the election. In California alone, 7.2 million evangelicals did not vote in California. 6.7 million did. 14 million evangelicals in California. You see, if you could get 5% of the evangelicals to register and 5% of those evangelicals who are registered out to vote, you'd be able to change your city council, your school board, your county race, your state races, the national races. This is the key voting block. Never before had 81% of the evangelicals voted for President Trump. That's never been a figure ever you could ever get. So that's why this election, whatever state you're in, if the evangelicals do what they normally do and don't register and don't get out to vote, the progressives will win. But if you want to turn this around, you get the evangelicals out to vote. So here's what we need to do. Build a database, do digital smart, do a get out the vote, do the voter guides. We've got voter guides that you can go to. Again, craighuey.com goes throughout Northern California, San Diego, electionform.org for evangelicals. We do these church election forms, and these are things that can be done to help change an election. So how then should we respond? We don't choose silence. We don't choose condemnation. We choose courage. We go out there and we make a difference. And whether it's spending an hour or a day or a week to make phone calls, to donate, to knock on doors, we can help candidates win an election. And so that's key to making sure we're able to do this. Finally, let me just say this. My book, The Deep State, this book will give you a guide to what is really happening. And the chapters in this are like, for example, about the intelligence agencies, the bloated bureaucracy, fat paychecks, socialist ideology, waste and inefficiency. Warning, judicial activists are legislating a dangerous far-left ideology from the bench. That's page 77. K-Street and the lobbyists, the invisible deep state support network, page 91. Unseen, unknown, unaccountable, the unholy alliance between the deep state and nonprofits. This book will open your eyes to what's happening and what we need to do. And so I hope you'll be able to get it. You can get it on Amazon. If you get it on Amazon, please write a review, or you can order it through deepstatebook.com, deepstatebook.com, and I'll autograph it. So I hope this was helpful, and we still have some of these collectible hats that you're welcome to be able to get. So with that, I want to transition over to actually going down the ballot. So those who are nationwide, thanks for listening. I hope that was helpful. I will send you Indivisible and those other materials that will help you be able to understand what's happening and what to do. Now, for those who are in California, let's do this. Let's go down the ballot. Let's take a look at the proposition, the judges, and the candidates so that we know how to vote our values and vote properly. So as we take a look, let's and welcome all the people who are joining us now here with this California election. The key now is to drain the Sacramento swamp. You know, we're #1 state in all 50 states for corruption in Sacramento. These are politicians being locked up or in jail. We also have the highest pay. We shouldn't even have a full-time legislature, but they get the highest pay. And then when they're out, they get these huge bloated salaries with the Sacramento bureaucracy. And the taxpayers, in California, we're tax slaves. This last year, we worked April 19th for local, county, and state and federal government before we got to keep our own money. Fact is, that's going to be in May in 2019. We need tax freedom. And then we also got to stop the nano state, the nanny state that's trying to manipulate. Part of that has to do with the attack on the faith community. There was this bill in Sacramento, and you know, whether you're Jewish or or Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, Christian, you should be on the side of freedom, of allowing people to have their own beliefs. This bill was telling Christians they could not believe and talk about that somebody who has same-sex identity problems, that they could be transformed. They could change. They could control their sexual urges or be transformed by the power of the Holy Spirit. That's their beliefs as Christians. But this bill would have said you can't do that. That meant outlawing seminars, outlawing counseling, outlawing certain books by people who write about this. And it would even possibly outlaw the Bible and make it so Amazon couldn't sell the Bible. I'm going to see if I can play that. So I can't play that video. But what the video would have shown you was one of the California politicians who said that Christians have to adapt. They have to evolve with changing times. Well, that's not freedom, to have them imposing their views. Then we have the whole economic and issues involving roads and water and retirement, all kinds of different things with release of prisoners here in California. It's terrible what's going on. One item after another, we get low ratings from all the different agencies. But it's not because of lack of money. Indeed, back in 2012, the whole budget was about $150 million, but today it's over $290 million. Are Californians better off? Do we have better education, better roads, better water? Do we have better services? Do we have a DMV that can even operate? No, obviously we don't. So we have a failed government here in California. We need better. We deserve better. We have the highest tax rates. We have been the second highest gasoline tax. We're now the highest gasoline tax. We're the 51st worst state to do business in. How can we be 51st? There's only 50 states. Well, they count Washington, D.C. 51st for 13 years by Chief Executive Magazine. We're the #1 state for poverty. 25–30% of the population is right on the poverty level. We're the #1 state for homelessness. This should not be. And we're even the #1 state for crime. You know, I was on Varney and Company, and I was talking about the crime wave. And on this national TV program, I was talking about, hey, lower income, there's a crime spike. Mid-income, there's a crime spike. High income, there's a crime spike. There's crime spike all over California. And the police aren't arresting people, and they're releasing people, and it's just a mess. Well, little did I know, this was in early March, little did I know about 3 days later, my son would be shot 5 times by 3 gang members, 3 Crip members, trying to rob him. You know, he was artery was shattered here, artery was shattered in his leg. He's rushed to the hospital. I'm on my way to New York to do another TV interview on Fox. Get the call. He's in the surgery between 9 o'clock at night to about 11 in the morning the next day. He flatlined. They got him back. And it's a miracle he's alive. It's a miracle he's recovered so fast. We praise God for that. You know, early March, he's shot. By Easter, he's on crutches going to church. He's still in recovery, but it's absolute miracle. And thanks for those who have contributed, those who have prayed, who know the situation. He's doing extremely well. A little bit of setbacks here and there, but he's on his way. But he's such an example where these 3 kids, juveniles with rap sheets, shoot him. 2 who were with the shooter, they get 10 days in jail and they're out. And we're fighting to make sure the other one gets proper punishment. Yet everything's caught on camera. Everything was seen. That's the broken system we have. So, and then we have all these costs. going up in California, all these taxes, all these regulations. It chases companies out of California, out of all these different companies. We've lost 1.5 million jobs in the last 7 years. Over 1 million people have left California. This is not right, what is happening. And 5.5 companies a week leaving California, that's crazy. This should be where companies want to come. This is where people should want to come. But that's not what's happening. We have kids leaving. We have, my son Caleb and another one of my kids, he comes to me and he says, Dad, I'm leaving California. I said, why, Caleb? Why would you want to leave California? And he goes, because, Dad, I'll never be able to buy a house here. He said, and further, Dad, in Nashville, Tennessee, I don't have to pay income tax. And you know what? 30 to 40% less costs of living in Tennessee. And I've got people all over the state who write to me. Literally every week I get letters. Craig, I'm moving to Arizona, Nevada. Here's my new zip code in Texas. Tell me how to vote in Virginia. They're leaving California because of the high costs, the middle class exodus, the wealthy flee, the retirees give up, businesses, entrepreneurs leave. Our quality of life goes down. The cost of almost everything goes up. We have less individual freedom of choice and individual freedom at all. And of course, this increase in crime. This is not what California should be. California should be just a growing economy, a society that's safe. That's what California should be. So we've got to get rid of these progressive Democrats who have messed things up so bad. And so I've taken a look at all the candidates. I've taken a look at what other groups say, conservative, Democrat, progressive, libertarian. I've seen what they say, evaluated the candidates. We rate each of the candidates. We have questionnaires for the candidates, and we come down to who we're going to recommend. And so one of the things I'm going to be sending to you is this comparison sheet. We have a couple of tools. Let me just grab this one thing here. This is a comparison sheet I'll send. We'll go over this very quickly. And you can pass this out to friends. This shows where the candidates stand on the issues. And what you'll see is there's night and day. In the governor's race, we have Gavin Newsom with a 1% biblical conservative worldview. John Cox with a 95%. How about bigger government? Gavin Newsom, 91%. John Cox, 13%. John Cox is a small business owner. He's kind of a conservative libertarian candidate that is a CPA, a venture capitalist, an attorney. And he's running against Gavin Newsom, who is an MSNBC commentator, a San Francisco mayor, and recently lieutenant governor of California. The amount of money that Newsom has dwarfs John Cox. Though in the polling, John Cox is staying right in there to be a bit competitive. And so I encourage you, do not give up on this race. I believe John Cox can win. I believe enough independents and even Democrats are disgusted with the state of California and the politics that we're going to be able to get John Cox elected. What we have to do is get the conservatives out, the Republicans out, the libertarians out, and the religious community out as a coalition, and we'll be able to win. And I think we can do that. So with John Cox, we're highly recommending him for governor of the state of California. And one of the key reasons is because when you vote for governor, they appoint the California Supreme Court, which is one of the most radical, progressive left, judicial activist Supreme Courts in the United States. When you look at this sheet I'm going to be sending to you, you can see the candidates are night and day. On Obamacare, Gavin Newsom's for it, John Cox is against it. Educational choice, Gavin Newsom's against educational choice, John Cox is for it. All the way down the line, night and day. Sanctuary state, Gavin Newsom's for it, John Cox is against it. When we talk about religious liberty, this is what gets so many pastors all upset. You know, I spoke to 500 Hispanic pastors in San Diego. These pastors were so tired of the violations of religious liberty that they wanted to vote for John Cox and get their fellowships out to do that. Over 1,000 other pastors I've talked to, same thing, never involved in politics. Now they want to do something because of the religious liberty issue. So, you know, we've got the top 10 family value California issues. That includes this whole idea of that would chase Biola and Azusa and Christian schools out of California. And Cox is against that. Newsom is for it. There was this recent attempt to destroy homeschooling in California. Newsom was for it. Cox is against it. And we have collected the top 10 family values. I'll send you what they are. But Newsom is 100% against these top 10 family value issues. Cox is 100% for them. And the issue of abortion, some people, that's not an issue. John Cox is not making that an issue. But Gavin Newsom is making that an issue. He thinks he can get votes on it because John Cox is pro-life. John Cox is pro-life because he believes in the science that life begins in the conception, also based upon the Bible. You see, when we look at the religious affiliation of these candidates, John Cox is a born-again Catholic. He's accepted Christ when he was in his 20s on a train and then went to Bible study with a small business owners group. Gavin Newsom is a nun, not a lady in black dress. He's a nun where it doesn't matter if you're Catholic, atheist, agnostic. He's none of these. And John Cox will base it upon Psalm 139. It's just one of the verses in the Bible. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. How awesome is that? Because God loves you and he knows you. He knew you be in your womb. He knew you in your mother's womb. He knew you as you grew up. He knows you now. And so Christians will usually make the stand for pro-life. And Greg Laurie Harvest Crusade in Orange County recently, Greg Laurie stood up and said, you know what? And he's talked about being pro-life and about the issue of abortion for 15 or 20 minutes. And he said, there's a man sitting in this crusade who his mom was raped, but she had him anyway. And his name is John Cox. And John Cox stood up. So we see there's night and day between Gavin Newsom and John Cox. Gavin Newsom's even for partial birth abortion. Many progressive Democrats are opposed to partial birth abortion. If a baby late term comes out of the womb, that baby lives, and you kill that baby, that's infanticide, that's murder. But if you pull the baby out and then suck out its brain, that's legal. That's partial birth abortion. And that's why so many people are against it. So where do they stand on the political spectrum? I'm going to send this chart to you. Gavin Newsom is to the left of Hillary Clinton. He's to the left of Barack Obama. And he's to the left of Jerry Brown. John Cox is to the right of John McCain and Mitt Romney. What about the lieutenant governor's race? In California, we have a terrible law that says the top two vote getters in the primary advance to the general election. There's no write-in. I think that's wrong. There's no write-in. And there's no third party you can vote for. You can't vote a libertarian as a protest vote. You have to either not vote for these two candidates for lieutenant governor, or you vote for one of them. If you don't vote for either, all your other votes for other candidates and propositions and judges will count. And a lot of people are voting on this race by not voting at all for either of the candidates. Many conservatives and Christians are trying to strategically limit evil on this campaign. Ed Hernandez is a Hillary Clinton Democrat, kind of a union machine type Democrat. Because of his age and because he's just so boring and inarticulate, I don't believe Ed Hernandez could ever advance to governor. But Alini is a Bernie Sanders socialist who's filled with energy, filled with excitement. She's articulate, she's smart, and she has a lot of money. Her dad's a multimillionaire doctor. She has a lot of money. She's poured money into her campaign. She could run for governor and become governor. She could be the first socialist vice president or even run for president. And so to try to stop her now would be probably smarter than anything anyone could do. And by that, you would vote for Ed Hernandez in order to stop Alini. Secretary of State, there's voter fraud going on in California. And with this voter fraud, it's crazy. It also is going on nationwide. I'm going to see if I have my voter fraud sheet here. I don't. But with the voter fraud, I had a person on staff register her dog for voting at my office address. Two things that shouldn't have happened. She got the ballot to mail in the primary and the ballot to mail in November. Her dog did. That just shows you that the Department of Motor Vehicles is registering people and they're messing it up. They're registering people who should not be registered legally. It's a mess. Mark Messner, we've given him strong endorsement. Vote for Mark Messner. Alex Padilla doesn't believe in voter fraud. He's trying to protect the terrible failed system that he's set up. We've got to get Mark elected and stop the voter fraud in California. Controller's race. We got Costas versus Betty. Costas is one of the few candidates. Now, understand on our website, craighuey.com, we rate the candidates. We rate them 1 star. Don't vote for any of them. 2 star. Hold your nose. They're better than the opponent. 3 star. They're pretty good. 4 star. They're very good. 5 star. They're amazing. Costas gets 5 stars. This guy understands what we need to do to protect the state of California and its economy. And so highly recommend Costas. Greg Colin's running against Fiona Ma. On the top 10 values, Fiona gets 0. Greg Colin gets 50%. So we're recommending Greg on treasurer. Attorney General is probably one of the most important votes on this ballot. The current Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, has filed close to 30 lawsuits against the Trump administration, wasting California's resources and tax money just to harass the Trump administration. This man has filed the lawsuit against pro-life pregnancy centers that cost taxpayers a bundle in trying to stop these pregnancy centers, forcing them to promote abortion. Well, the Supreme Court turned that down. You may remember the videographer who, with undercover video, showed Planned Parenthood selling body parts. Well, he's filed 15 felony counts against that producer. The producers had to be silent, can't show his films, and is being bled with the money on court cases. This is our Attorney General. He's filed suit against the Little Sisters of the Poor. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. He's 0 on the family issues. Steve Bailey gets 5 stars, and he's with us 100% on the issues. He is a great candidate, and so I highly recommend him. On insurance commissioner, now an insurance commissioner, this is an interesting race. This is where Steve Poizner is running against Ricardo Laura. Steve Poizner used to be the insurance commissioner. He's for more of a free market in medical care against socialized medicine. On the top 10 family values, he gets an 80%. His opponent gets, Ricardo Laura, 0%. His opponent, Ricardo Laura, is for socialized medicine. And I highly recommend Steve Poizner. Now, he's running as an independent for insurance commissioner this time, but he's pulling ahead right now in some of the polls. So highly recommend Steve. State Superintendent of Public Education, you have two Democrats running against each other. But there's a big difference in these Democrats. Tony Thurmond is the tool and the puppet of the California Teachers Association. It says $3 million. They're pouring in closer to $10 million against Tony. They want him to win. They want to defeat Marshall Tuck, who's an advocate for the charter schools. But there's a lot more at stake. You see, Tony is against homeschooling. He's against Christian education. He even wants to stop religious songs at Christmas in public schools. Marshall Tuck's just the opposite. You know, in this comparison chart, you can see even the transgender bathroom bill, where a boy says, hey, I feel like a girl. I'm going to go to the girls' shower. They can do so. Tony says yes. Marshall Tuck says no. Top 10 family values. Marshall Tuck is with us on most of those. Tony Thurmond on none of those. So I highly recommend Marshall Tuck for that race. What do you do about U.S. Senate race? So when I go to different groups, I ask for a show of hands. I ask, how many of you saw Dianne Feinstein in the hearings with Kavanaugh? Almost everybody raises their hands. Everybody, 95% raise their hands. And they're angry at Dianne Feinstein. So what do you do with this race? You've got Dianne Feinstein, who is a Hillary Clinton type Democrat. You have Kevin DeLone, who is a Bernie Sanders socialist. And so in this campaign, do you leave it blank? Well, I can understand not voting for either. Again, all your other votes will count. Again, you can't write in. You can't vote for a third party. But a lot of people, and I happen to agree with them, are voting for Dianne Feinstein. Now, before you get really upset, let me explain why. Dianne Feinstein is more pro-Israel. Kevin DeLone is anti-Israel. So there's issues like that. But the biggest reason is that Dianne will only serve one more term. After this term, she will be out. And we have a chance of replacing her with somebody who's really good and powerfully connected to transforming our government and our society the right way. Kevin DeLone, if he gets elected, he could be in there for a second term and a third term because he's so young. But more than that, he, as a socialist, would love to be the first socialist president of the United States. And he's articulate and aggressive enough to try to move his way up. To strategically stop Kevin DeLone, it's probably smarter to vote for Dianne Feinstein in this election. Now, we're probably the only group in the United States that rate the judges. We rate all the offices of the judges. It's all on CraigHuey.com. The handout I sent to you, the comparison chart, will give these ratings as well. So because we have people all over the state, I'm not going to go into all the judges. So you're going to have to go to the website. But let me explain this to you so that you can have an understanding of it. Everybody's going to be affected by the California Supreme Court, which is the most liberal progressive court, maybe in the United States. It's dominated by judicial activists. So a strict constructionist, it doesn't matter if they agree with legislation or disagree with it. They want to see if it's constitutional. They're strict construction. They will take a look at the law and interpret it and see if it's constitutional. But judicial activists will impose their own values and their own political views, and they will legislate from the bench. That's a huge difference, and that's what's caused so many of the problems in our society today is these activists, these judicial activist judges legislating from the bench. So in California, we only have basically a couple who of Supreme Court judges who are still strict constructionists. Carol Corrigan is one of them. We rated her on a 1 to 10 scale as an 8. She's very good, and we recommend yes on her. Why yes? Because she's not running against Leandra. It's a yes or no. If she gets 50% plus, she's in. If she gets 49%, she's out. So it's a yes or no. So we say yes on Carol at an 8. She's a strict constructionist. Leandra Kruger, she's a judicial activist. She has a low rating of 3. We're recommending a no. Who is she? Well, one of the chapters in the Deep State book I wrote, it talks about the Department of Justice and the abuse of power and the corruption in the Department of Justice. She's from Obama's Department of Justice. And Jerry Brown took her from that Department of Justice, put her on the California Supreme Court. She's never been a judge before, and her goal is to transform our culture and our state and our economy with her basically socialist ideas. So we're saying vote no on Leandra. And what about the confusing propositions? Sometimes with the propositions, when you're voting yes, you're voting no, and sometimes when you're voting no, you're voting yes. So what about these propositions? Let's take a look at them. Oops. Let's see. There we go. So with the propositions, the first fundamental thing to remember is that if it's a bond, you probably should vote no. If it's a local bond, a school bond, county bond, vote no. They're ripoffs of the taxpayers. Money should come from other sources, not through a bond. Why? For every dollar spent, you have to pay back $2. So for $10 billion, you're really paying 20. Who gets the extra $10 billion? Not the project. It goes in the pockets of bankers and investors in the form of interest. It's hugely expensive, and you don't want to use that type of thing. So the first proposition is Proposition 1. This is Veterans and Affordable Housing Bond Act, but that's a misstatement. You see, the Attorney General's office put veterans in there to try to get people to vote for it. It's affordable housing for the homeless and the low income. And it's kind of a social experiment to build $350,000 homes around mass transportation areas in LA and San Francisco that people can ride the trains and be close to the train tracks. I think this is a ripoff. $4 billion, which is really $8 billion in bonds. We're in debt. We can't afford it. $2 million has gone to support it. You know who's supporting it? It's the housing and construction industry that's going to build the houses. It's a ripoff. Number 2 is confusing ripoff. So let me explain this. So far, 62% of the people are saying yes, but there's the millionaires tax about 6 years ago that was passed. It chased out some millionaires, but with the millionaires tax gave money that went to the counties, and the counties then would use that money on mental illness. Well, the legislature said, hey, let's take this millionaires tax money on mental illness and put it into housing for the homeless. And the court said, no, you can't steal that money. So then the legislature said, okay, we'll put it on the ballot so we can steal the money. So that's basically how they did it. So I'm saying vote no. The state should not use those funds to go for this housing. Incidentally, $2 million is being put in by the people who would build the housing. Biggest taxpayer ripoff award of 2018, that goes to Proposition 3. So with bonds for water, we've had many bonds for water. Most of the money hasn't been spent. Now, if you've lived in California for any length of time, you know that we have these long, long periods of drought. And then we have these massive rains. Then these long periods of drought and massive rains. So what has the politicians done over the years? Nothing. 95% of it goes into the ocean. They are not building dams. They're not building different systems to collect that water and save that water. They're not doing it. And so this one is a proposition on water. Some people may think it goes to dams. It does not. It does not. A little bit goes to the Oroville Dam, but most of it doesn't even go to government to create water projects. It goes to radical environmental groups. The person behind it has been involved in these radical environmental groups for many years. And so this is a way for him to give money to his friends, money to different political connections. He's going to build bike lanes along rivers, things like that. It's not going to help with any saving of water. So I'd say vote no on this. It's $8.9 billion. In other words, $17 billion. Vote no on this one. Proposition 4. So, you know, everyone has a heart for these kids. If you've seen the Shriners TV commercial, you just want to cry, and you're so excited that they're able to help those different kids. It's awesome what they're able to do. Well, this is like the third time these 17 hospitals have gotten together to try to get money, not from the legislature, but from the taxpayers in the form of bonds. So this is a $1.5 billion bond. In other words, $3 billion. And they're putting in their own money to support this bond. Well, I want to help the kids, but I don't think this is the way to help the kids. Several things about it. Let me just tell you why I would say vote no on this. A no vote, if this money is really needed for these hospitals, then it should come out of the general fund, not a bond. That itself should be the no vote. We have $80 billion going to the train to nowhere. Put $3 billion into the hospitals. Be better used than this nonsense train. And we duplicate that throughout the state budget. But the legislature, you know, oh, put it on the bond. No, it's not free money. Second, if it's going to get money at all from taxes, there needs to be better accountability for how that money's spent. And there's no accountability with this. In fact, most of the people that are involved in the leadership of these hospitals are making over $1 million, several $1 million. This is not right if it's going to be taxpayers' money. And the third thing is this. Should government be doing this? You know, foundations and corporations and individuals like you and me, we contribute to help these kids. And that's the American way. You know, back in the 1800s, Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America book wrote about how he saw, unlike any other country, people freely giving. That's kind of the American way, freely giving, not being forced to give. And that's what we can do, and we can give to these, and we can help the kids. It doesn't have to be a bond. Now, Proposition 5. This is the one where if you're a homeowner and you're over 55, you may want to move. You may want to move to a higher priced house. Probably can't find a lower priced house. You may want to move to a different location, better weather, cheaper living, near the kids or grandkids. But you can't, because you're really restricted, because if you move, you're going to get 400, 500, 600, 800% spike in your property taxes. Well, what this does, it says if you're 55 and over and you move, you can move to any county in California and any price home, and you get to keep your Proposition 13 tax protection. That's awesome. So too many seniors have been trapped, can't move, or they move out of state, or surprised because they get this huge property tax bill they didn't expect. So this enables you to have the freedom to take your Proposition 13 tax protection, where you're not going to be taxed out of existence, and bring it to another house. So I'm saying vote yes on this one. This is a good vote. And, 7 million people, $7 million has gone into it. Probably more will. You know who's doing that? It's the realtors who expect a lot more people buying and selling going on in California. The gas tax. 58% of the people are saying yes, and they're smart. The politicians and the business interests have joined together to fight this. They want you to pay that 12-cent gallon tax that was imposed by the politicians. They want you to be able to pay $500, $800, $1,000, $2,000 a year more just for driving. They hate gasoline. They hate cars. They want this funnel of money for their projects. They're scaring people into thinking bridges are going to break and roads aren't going to be repaired. That's so false. We have the highest tax of anybody for these car taxes. We can repair our roads and our bridges with that money. We don't need this extra 12 cents they snuck through the legislature. So I'm recommending a definite yes vote on this. Don't incidentally fall into the trap of what this is called. It says on the ballot something like stops the repair roads. That's the Attorney General coming up with. What this does, it gives you back a little bit more freedom. You're not paying as much in the car tax. Proposition 7. I'm not sure how to vote for this. My wife's voting yes. I might vote yes. Maybe I'll vote no. 43% of the people are saying yes, but it's kind of a nonsense one. Nobody's contributing for it or against it. If we vote yes, the legislature has to do a 2/3 vote. That's not going to happen. Then the federal government has to say, okay, I don't know if that's going to happen. Some people who like this and say vote yes, basically, they say it'll save lives because people die when there's that time change, March to early November. I had one person in one of my speeches that I've done throughout California, and they came up to me and said, Craig, for 30 years, I've been sewing and fixing and repairing clocks in California. And I got to tell you that if this passes, I'll become a millionaire because businesses and computers and so much equipment is timed to the daylight savings that if it changes, they have to hire me to fix it. That would make me say no. Proposition 8. This is so critical. Kidney dialysis clinics. Now, here's the thing. Right now, 47% of the people are saying yes, 34% no. That's horrific. Because if the yeses get this, these private kidney dialysis clinics are basically going to go out of business. It'll be a government takeover of the kidney dialysis clinics. Now, it doesn't matter where you go for medical care. Sometimes there's a poor clinic or office, sometimes an okay, sometimes really great. Sometimes in the great one, there might be a poor employee or employee didn't have any sleep or shortage of employees, something. There's nothing that's perfect. But everything I've studied and everything I've looked at is two things. These dialysis clinics are fine. This is a union takeover to have socialized medicine. And the second thing I've learned from this is that when we talk about these dialysis clinics, that we don't want to turn that into a DMV. We don't want long lines, poor service. And that's exactly what we'll have if we have socialized medicine taking over the kidney dialysis clinics. So we're saying vote no on this. Vote no on this. And 17 million, it'll be over 25 million put into opposing it. Who's opposing it? The dialysis clinics. They don't want to go out of business, so you can't blame them. But please vote no on this. Let's not have this government takeover. Now, the most deceptive proposition of 2018, that's Proposition 10. Over the years as an economist, I've looked at rent control. And what I've seen is constant failure. When the government tries to do this rent control, it has negative, unintended consequences. There's shortages. Apartments that exist fall apart. new constructions is in everything but apartments. There's black markets. It's horrific. In California, the second highest, most aggressive rent control is in Santa Monica, and they have hugely high prices and just a corrupt system. What about the number one rent control area in California? That's San Francisco, and they have the highest rents. This is broken. We need to say no to this. We cannot allow this to expand where even somebody's house, if they're renting it out, is going to be under rent control. And it forms of more bureaucracy, more control, less freedom, but also it will contribute to the shortage we have of housing here in California. We have a crisis in California. Rents are too high. Not enough homes have been built. Not enough apartments have been built. But that's because of Sacramento and the county and the local governments. That's because of CEQA. That's because it costs 3 to 4 times to build something here in California than it does in Texas. That's because of the mandates. That's because of all the regulations that are going on. Even the lawsuits. There's a project going on that's off the 5 freeway on the way from Los Angeles to Fresno. Beautiful, thousands of homes being built. Filed suit just the other day that puts it into paralysis. My wife and I have a second home up in Lake Arrowhead. Beautiful planned community. Absolutely gorgeous. 3 different owners. Each one went bankrupt because of the lawsuits. California needs major change to bring down rent. We've got to build more apartments. We've got to build more homes. Rent control does not do that. It does just the opposite. Vote no on that bill. Proposition 10. This is, I'm sorry, vote no on Proposition 10. You can see the contributions. All right. Proposition 11. Oh, incidentally, my handout explains. Proposition 9 is not on the ballot. If you notice, we skipped it, because the California Supreme Court did something they should not have done. Now, I don't care if you like this proposition or not. It got enough signatures to officially be on the ballot. But what 9 did, it said this: California would be divided into 3 states. And the state Supreme Court said, oh, no, you can't vote on that. Well, that was wrong, whether you like it or not. So that's why it's not on the ballot. So now, Proposition 11. So I hear the arguments, pro and con. I hear from employees, and 70-75% of all the 911 calls, a private EMT or ambulance comes to help you out. Well, what happened a while back was that, the way it's always been, if you always have your phone on to hear 911 calls. If you're on lunch break, you're on a break, you rush to help the person. Well, the court came along and said, you can't do that. You got to turn off your emergency phone and just eat your lunch. Just take your 10-minute break. Well, now this has caused the potential of delays going on and people not being able to help people in crisis. So what this bill does, this proposition allows the EMTs and paramedics to go help somebody on a 911 call if they're on a meal or rest break. I say vote yes on this one. It's only common sense. It's just the unions that are trying to stop that. So vote yes on this. Now, Proposition 12. This is a confinement of certain farm animals. If you remember, about 6 years ago, we voted on this and had bigger cages and bigger areas for the farm animals. And it was warned that, prices of chicken and eggs would go up, and it did. But they do have these larger cages. Now, this makes it even bigger. Well, nobody wants to be cruel to animals. So should we vote for this or should we not? Well, I struggled and I studied it. And here's what I came to the conclusion of. This is not needed. You see, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, all these Jack in the Box, all these people who buy chicken and eggs require even bigger space than what we now have, as big or bigger than what's on Proposition 12. So the private sector is already taking care of it. But what this will do is they'll set up a bureaucracy, an army of people going to the small farmers, measuring things, requiring all kinds of extra costs. And, it's at this point, it's almost unnecessary. It's because anybody who's seriously a farmer is going to be doing what these other companies are already requiring. So I say vote no on Proposition 12. So all the recommendations are available on your computer or on your cell phone. You can even go in the polling booth and go straight down the ballot all the way from Northern California to San Diego. You can do this from city council up to governor. All the proposition, all the judges, all recommended here with 1-star to 5-star rating. And I encourage you, follow me on Twitter. I encourage you to be involved with me on Facebook, to get my newsletter, the Huey Report. Here's where we talk about politics and economics you won't find anywhere else. And Reality Alert, that's the newsletter for evangelical Christians. And I encourage you to take a look at that. And how should we respond? Well, we can't choose silence. There's too much at stake. We can't choose condemnation. We got to choose courage. We got to stand for what's right. That may mean in the next few weeks before the election, donate to candidates of your choice. If you're not sure who to donate, email me at craig@craighuey.com, and I'll give you some candidates that need that. Volunteer. I'll tell you which candidates in your area need volunteers. Pray about this election. Going back to volunteering, even if you could only do an hour or a day or a few days or a week to call, to knock on doors, they make it easy, but we won't win if we don't have volunteers. We won't win if we don't have donors. And I don't believe we'll win if we don't have prayer. So I'm going around California. You can see the schedule on my website, craighuey.com. And I'd love to be able to have you buy a collectible hat, Make California Great Again. We've got a few left, but most important thing is my book, The Deep State, 15 Surprising Dangers You Should Know. And this book not only exposes the corruption in D.C., but gives a path to how we can turn this all around. You can get it on Amazon, and if you get it on Amazon, please write a review. Or you can go to the deepstatebook.com, and be able to get it and on my own website, and I'll be glad to sign autograph on it. So I'm on radio and TV nationwide about this. I hope that you get it and love to get your input, what you thought about it. All right. You have been great sticking in there and seeing how to vote right. I really appreciate it. You got a question? Email me at craig@craighuey.com, and I'll be glad to answer it. And this is an important election. We cannot lose this midterm. We can't fall into paralysis that will happen in this important midterm election. So get in there. Make sure you vote. Friends vote. Relatives vote. If you go to church, people in that church get out to vote. And then volunteer. Help somebody out. Thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any questions. God bless you.